did. Hello. Hello, welcome. Welcome, Bruce. Welcome, Chazelle, if I pronounced that correctly. Thank you for joining us today. We're gonna wait just a couple more minutes. Attendees are coming in. And so we will get started in just about a minute here. Welcome, Janet. Welcome, Lisa and Phil. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to give a few other people just a moment to jump on, and then we will get started. We're very happy everyone is here. If you have a moment and it's easily accessible to you, please feel free to pull up chat, and then you can also have a look at any questions that others are adding to the conversation, and certainly you can post your questions there as well. You can also just take a moment to say hello and maybe share where you're dialing in from, or share what the weather outside is like wherever you are.
Lisa, I see you've joined us. Can I ask us to just test something? Can you come off mute on your own, or do we have to unmute you?
I just clicked something that said allow to talk. So I think I had to do that.
Yes, you did have to do that, and now I'm able to speak. So you have the power to put people muted or unmute them.
I have the power. I love it. Yeah. I am going to give everyone the power to come off mute and talk. Of course, whenever you're in webinars like this, it's very beneficial to keep your phone on mute because you never know when there might be unexpected background noise. So if it's okay with everybody, I'm going to allow you to talk, but then if you could please put yourself on mute until you are ready to talk, that would be wonderful. We'll do that, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Cary.
Absolutely. Okay. So everybody's with us today should now have the ability to talk, should you choose to hit unmute. And this is a little bit of a smaller group than most of these webinars that we've done. We fully expected that because this is a pretty targeted discussion and concept. So I think we'll have more time today to actually have some friendly discussion and certainly to take questions. And do feel free to come off mute, even interrupt us and add those questions in as we go. We can make this webinar be a bit more conversational than some of the larger webinars. So shall I dive right in, Jayne?
Let's go.
Let's go. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. The focus of this is the third in a series of webinars around coaching. And this one is specifically focused on how to strategically invest in coaching as a managed service. And so we'll start right off with what are some of our objectives for this. So first of all, not everybody has a clear concept of what it really means to have a managed service, coaching as a managed service. So we'll start off with a bit of clarity around that. And then we'll talk through some pros and cons actually to different stakeholder groups because those pros and cons are different to different people involved. We'll share some of our insights, some of our tips, and some recommended next steps if your organization is considering investing in a managed service approach to coaching. So we would love to know, quick poll, why did you decide to join us today? So I'm gonna launch this poll, and this just gives us a little bit of sense of what you hope to get out of this time as well, so that we can adjust ourselves accordingly. So please take a moment. Excellent. I'll leave that poll open for another minute or two and then share the results. But while those responses come in, I just want to take a moment and say a few things about Churchill Leadership Group, the group that is putting this on. So we are a global group of primarily executive coaches that work with organizational leaders around strengthening capacity, building leadership, capacity and impact, and also teams and team coaching. So we work, as I mentioned, we're global. We work all around the world. And this incredible organization was created by none other than the lovely Jayne Jenkins, who's sipping her tea right now. And so we'll hear from Jayne in just a moment. Churchill has a focus on, and our slide got a little messed up here. Sorry, guys, ignore that. Executive coaching, as I mentioned, team coaching, which is like the X Games of coaching. Leader as great coach. So we believe that coaching is best when it is available to anyone in the organization. And that often means empowering your leaders to be great coaches to their people. We also focus on manager effectiveness, and we do all of this with a strength-based lens. So we believe investing in strengths and building on strengths. As you may imagine, we historically have done a lot of this in person, but we have enjoyed very much over the last few months doing all of this remotely and having a lot of incredible success with that. So I can speak personally that I've had clients say, well, we should always do it this way. This is better in so many ways. As I mentioned, not only
Cary, sorry to interrupt you. I see the poll is blocking the slides. I'm not sure if that's the same for everyone else. We might want to close the poll.
Oh, that's no fun. All right. Well, and we have 100% of responses now. So I will close the poll. Thank you for letting me know that. So 4 out of 5 of you are here to learn what coaching as a managed service is and to see if it's right for us. So that's a pretty strong conglomerate. And then 1 considering partnering with a coaching company. So thank you all very much. That gives us a good sense. And now let me get this poll off of our beautiful faces. We wanted just to give you a snapshot of some of the coaches that work with Churchill. Very global, very diverse, and very just excellent. And then, of course, some of the industries that we work across. So I will just scroll through these. You can see we've got great diversity in terms of the organizations that we work with across sectors. Connie Evans is with us here today, monitoring the chat and helping us to run this webinar. So everybody say hi, Connie. Hi, Connie. A little bit about myself. I am one of the coaches that works for Churchill. I have a background in organizational psychology, my doctorate in organizational psychology, and so I enjoy thinking about things not just from the individual leadership perspective, but truly from a team perspective and from a systems perspective. I live in Arlington, Virginia, where it is beautiful and sunny today. We're getting another sunny day. Our incredible Jayne Jenkins, Churchill's founder and CEO, and of course also executive coach, is with us as well. Jayne, say a few things about yourself for those who have never had the pleasure of meeting you.
Thank you. I am a coach. I've been coaching for about 20 plus years, first as a leader coach, then went on to be an executive and team coach with specialties in team performance and strengths and communication. Most of my job now is running Churchill because we have so many amazing coaches, hundreds of them, including Coach Cary. And so what I bring to our conversation, our webinars, is that global view across clients, across cultures, across regions. And so I love having 2 of us do these webinars because you get different perspectives. So I'm delighted to be here. And it's nice to be in the interviewee's seat for a change, Cary. I'm liking this.
I'm liking being in the interviewer seat for a change. So this is great for both of us. So we alluded to it just then. The way that we have set up this particular series is interview style. The last couple of interviews, Jayne has interviewed me. This time we've switched it up a bit, and I'm going to interview Jayne, although we both might contribute here and there. And of course, we also are always open to the expertise in the room, right? So you all, I'm sure, are bringing your own experiences to bear. Okay, so let's just get grounded very quickly in the promise of coaching. There is a fair amount of research these days, there could be a lot more, but in what coaching can do for organizations. And I'm not going to read through these. Some of you have seen these data points before. What we really wanted to get to was more of the pieces of what is coaching as a managed service. So we know coaching holds huge promise. And then the question becomes, why would you maybe have someone manage a coaching service, and what value could that add? So Jayne, could you please tell us about coaching as a managed service?
Thank you, Cary. So I think the first thing to ground us on is having coaching be a managed service at your organization is not for everyone. It starts to become an option necessary when you start to scale coaching. So for example, if your organization uses a handful of coaches and you can manage the process very well, you don't need a managed service. But as coaching has grown incredibly over the last 3 years, then more people want to coach. Organizations want to invest in coaching as a strategic tool and accelerator to drive their business initiatives, to grow their talent, to do succession planning. Then coaching becomes more work. And so you might make a shift from having internal coaches do the work to needing external coaches, and then more external coaches, and integrating coaching into sort of the fiber of what you do, depending on where you are. And so most companies are not experts in coaching, right? If you're a pharmaceutical company, if you're a tech company, if you're a healthcare company, chances are your expertise is somewhere else. So this is when companies start to want to partner with coaching companies. And we can partner by providing one-off coaches for your individual one-off needs, or when you want to scale it, it becomes a managed service. So it's about having a trusted partner to scale coaching. And that might be scaling it a little bit. It might be scaling it a lot globally. It varies depending on what you need. So what we'll try and do today is give you an overview, but recognize a managed service would be unique to your needs. And it typically includes these 3 pieces. The thinking phase is strategy, helping you really understand why you're using coaching, what you expect it to do for your culture and your results, specific goals, where you're going to use it in the organization. When you say, yes, coaching is the right option versus another initiative. And so getting you to think more broadly, deeper, and more towards the future needs of your organization to put a true coaching strategy in place. And most companies have never done that. There are some companies that reach out to us that have done some of that work. And so then our role becomes sort of pressure testing that and making it better. But a lot of companies come to us and like, we know coaching works, we want to expand it, but we're not sure what to do. So that's the strategy phase of the partnership. That might be just some upfront consulting work, and you pay us for a matter of hours, and it might be a few hours, it might be longer work partnering with you to put the strategy in place. Then we want to implement the coaching, the process. What is a standard executive or leadership coaching engagement in your organization? Do you offer team coaching? Do you offer leaders to learn how to coach? Do you offer group coaching for more first-line leaders? There are lots of different options there. So what process will work for your organization? How do you say yes to coaching? How do you say no to coaching based on what the leader or the team needs? So then you start implementing the strategy with the right process. So what we want to make sure in this phase, and this is where we help you, is it aligns to the culture that you want, you currently have and you want to create. It aligns to any sort of leadership capabilities that you said are important, any values in your organization. This all has to align. You want to make sure that the process is very consistent. So the experience for someone who works in Shanghai feels very similar, but individualized to someone that works in San Francisco. You also want to build clarity across your organization that we are doing coaching and this is why, and this is how we do it. So if this process isn't done well, it can cause roadblocks, hiccups, problems further down the line. And the third piece is the execution of those engagements, whether it's a one-on-one engagement for an executive, a high potential leader wanting coaching for 6 months because they're taking on a bigger role, whether you want to embed coaching into a leadership program, or whether you want team coaching. It's having execution being turnkey, where we provide the coaches, we run the engagements, we measure success, and we provide you the data that will inform future decisions. So we call it SPE, strategy, process, and execution. Cary, what would you add to that for clarity for our audience?
I really feel like you covered the basis on that one. I don't know that I would add anything at this juncture. I know I have been internal to an organization and have stood up internal coaching benches, which then got too big and too overwhelming for me to manage. And so I then turned to coaching as a managed service. So I do know what it's like to be on the inside. And I just sort of sensed that opportunity to shift and to have somebody take on that management. And all I will share is that it was a huge relief for me, and something that had started to really gnaw up a lot of my time suddenly became something that was very streamlined, and I could keep it like 5% of my job, and I could go invest the other 95% of my job in more strategic, forward-looking things and connecting the coaching to other things we're doing instead of having my internal time really consumed by it. So I've seen it get overwhelmed. I've experienced it getting overwhelming, and I have really appreciated that managed service approach, which is also why I'm here today. So we'd love to hear from you all as well. I'm going to throw up a poll that simply asks you to reflect on the hardest part of making coaching work. And this is a choose all that I think it's a choose all that applies. So please feel free to select as many or as few of these as you choose. Lots of great answers coming in. We'll give it one more minute or so. Excellent. There we go. We got 100% response rate on that. And here you go. I'll share it with everyone for everyone to see. So again, a fair amount of overlap, and really hitting on, I think, all of the options, indeed, all the options that we put into the survey. So thank you guys. And there are so many elements that come into play. For me as an internal person doing this, one of the hardest parts was that decision point of, well, a couple decision points, but it was more of like the who gets the coaching. So number one, we wanted for this organization to set it up as very much as a benefit, and therefore a lot of people wanted coaching. And then it was sort of, okay, well, who's going to pay for it? Their own organization? Are we centrally funding it, right, from like our bucket of money? And having a managed service around that ensured that there was a consistent process in place instead of making decisions ad hoc, which then could very easily get perceived as favoritism or unfairness to one group or one person over another. Okay, I think I shared those results, didn't I?
You did. Yeah, we saw them.
So this is how we think of this shift. And I personally love this comic, trying to organize a stampede, but everybody's got their own agenda. And of course, it's the classic, like, herding cats, right? Whoever tried to get a cat to go where you want. My son chases his friends' cats around all the time. It never works. The cat never ends up where you want it to. And then as a contrast to that, think about just the beauty, but also the cohesion of birds migrating, right? Like they are, although there's a lot of shift and coming and going and flex to that, there's a lot of flexibility with that. There is still, when you look at it, you can see that everybody's going in the same direction. Everybody is sort of coming together and staying together. And so I find that to be a beautiful metaphor of what it looks like to have a managed service approach versus like an approach that truly can feel like you're herding cats.
Can I add a comment there? Well, it's really an example, Cary, please. When we partner with organizations, it's not the organization that's total control, it's a true partnership. And so not only do we provide coaches for the execution part, we provide a project manager and a strategic thinker for the other pieces as well. A few years ago, I was talking to a client of a large organization, and they were thinking of making the transition from sort of the cats to the birds, right, in this visual. And they described it as when they were in the cat phase of, I don't even know how many vendors we use for executive coaching. We think it's 22 or more. We have no idea if those engagements are working. We have no idea of the difference in costs that we're paying. And we have no idea if those engagements are aligned to our strategy. And often that's the case, right? Companies go from realizing coaching works, do more of it, but it's sort of all over the place. And that's good because people want coaches. But now we've got to really make it work strategically for our organization. And that's really the shift that we're trying to visualize here.
Yeah, beautifully said. That was my experience as well from the inside.
Right.
So just a key question right up front, right? To think about, does a managed service make sense for your organization? So here are some things to consider. Our experience is that a managed service makes a lot of sense if, on the left side here, if you want to expand, in particular, expand beyond executives. So usually, just because of the way the organizations go, if you're only targeting executives, the numbers might be manageable. In my case, the organization was large enough that even just with executives, the number was not manageable or became unmanageable. But for a lot of companies, if it's just a few at the top, they can manage it. When it starts to bleed into more generic leadership coaching, high potential coaching, certainly if you're moving into career coaching or team coaching or wanting to help people get coaching around career job transition, then it becomes something that can very quickly feel difficult to handle for any one group or individual. So scale is one big factor. Also, it really helps to have a managed service if you're trying to expand beyond a local geography. If your coaching is limited geographically, you might be able to have, sort of a set of local vendors that you can get to know well enough and sort of feel like you can wrap your hands around. When it goes global, it becomes very difficult to get a sense of global differences in coaching. We'll talk about a lot of this, but I'll just leave it with that. And then if you want to reduce the number of vendors that you're having to deal with, if you want to have greater consistency in terms of coach quality, better consistency perhaps in some of the selection criteria around your coaches, just greater efficiency from a contractual perspective or a payment perspective, then it makes a lot of sense to move to a managed service, because the administration of one managed service provider, at least in my experience, was so much less than the administration of a ton of different vendors and all those ad hoc requests. If what you really need is just a few external coaches, perhaps to work with a very select few people in the organization, if your organization is limited in terms of geography, then you can sort of manage with your current vendors, and there's probably no reason to go to a managed service, simply meaning that the investment in the managed service provider may not be worth the benefit that you get from it on the back end.
And Cary, another thing I will just add to that is rarely do we work with an organization, if you just go back one slide, and all at once they want coaching for all these different things, the hypos that they've identified in the talent management process, coaching as part of a leadership program for top talent, team coaching, career coaching. Organizations don't say we want to do all that at once, right? It's usually a gradual process where they'll start with senior leaders. Maybe we're trying to change our culture, or we've learned because of COVID that our senior leaders need a different type of skill set, and so we need more coaching. They'll usually start somewhere. Then as it evolves and the partnership continues to grow, they might now we're ready to introduce team coaching solutions, right? Then we expand it. So I just want to, it's usually a process over time as the organization grows.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing, and I absolutely want us to move on. But what you made me realize, and I'm not necessarily proud of it, is that when I was trying to manage the executive coaching myself, and people would come to me and say, oh, we need team coaching, or this person wants some career coaching, I was actually pretty quick to say no, because I was overwhelmed. I was getting overwhelmed. And so I didn't want to be the person, right, in the talent organization that was quickly coming back and saying, I'm sorry, we can't do that. But I became that person. And I think that's also where I started to look for, okay, how can we make this more efficient so that we can expand coaching? And I'm not reacting to these requests actually in a negative way.
It's a great real life learning, right? We have to go through it sometimes to appreciate it.
Yeah,
I understand that.
So we also wanted to explore some of the pros and cons, and as I mentioned at the beginning, through the lens of different stakeholder groups. So Jayne, I'm going to turn this over to you to sort of talk through the lens of HR and the sponsor or the boss in the equation, and then the coachee in the equation.
Thank you. So some of this we've already covered, and I mentioned that a managed service is a true partnership between an organization like Churchill and the client. And a lot of that partnership happens at sort of what I call central HR, head office HR, where talent management is normally run as a functional entity and includes HR business partners that are supporting the business. So it's a partnership with HR that includes those two usually. And so if HR central and in the business across the country, the globe, whatever your geography your organization covers, are dealing with many vendors, it's hard to get consistency. So it's really an advantage, a pro for HR to streamline vendors. It doesn't mean you have to use one vendor, right? Sometimes we're differentiated from other vendors because we have a strengths approach with StrengthsFinder, and they believe in a strengths approach. They'll have us do some of the coaching, and then they may have another team that another vendor that specializes in career coaching. I'm not saying you have to choose one. Sometimes people choose two or maybe three. There's a downside potentially, and we talk about this in the strategy phase, that the leaders, so think of the coachee as maybe a director who wants coaching and their boss being a VP, who's their sponsor, might want to use a coach they know or a coach a friend has recommended to them. And that's how we end up with lots of vendors all over the country. And then it becomes a procurement issue, a contracting issue. And let's say you want diverse vendors, like we're a women's certified organization, and that's what you want, but you're hiring all these different vendors that are not. It just becomes hard to manage. So you have to, in the strategy phase and the process phase, make sure that you've got a clear strategy, you have input from business leaders, that HR has input from business leaders, so that when we say, okay, we're going to provide a team of coaches around the globe or whatever geography you need, the sponsors and the coaches still have choice, right? So although they can't use whoever they want, they still get definite choice with a selection of bios, and they get to interview coaches to choose the right one. So we want to prevent that being an X there, a con, but that is a risk. When you have a clear strategy and a process, it's easier for HR to say to a leader, no, that's not within our coaching strategy, because we have a coaching strategy. It's easier for a senior leader, who is often the sponsor, to say no to one of their team members if the need doesn't fit the coaching strategy. I have a friend that says it's easier for him to say no if he has an immovable object, like some other reason to say no versus to damage the relationship. And so the strategy is that immovable object. You've agreed as an organization with different stakeholders what the strategy needs to be, and that enables you then to say yes or no without feeling guilty, right? With confidence. Cost savings. And so I'll go to the bottom, setup costs. There's usually a setup cost for a managed service that covers the setting up of the strategy and the process. That can be a small cost, it can be a little bigger, but it's not a huge cost. And then that's in place. And then what you want to do is negotiate for the engagement costs, which is the third line here. And that's where a managed service can create savings for you. You might be paying more by using lots of vendors versus having a negotiated cost for different coaching services, coaching for your C-suite, coaching for VPs, coaching for first-line leaders, team coaching. And you can negotiate typically with companies like Churchill to get a better price, right? So apart from the upfront price, the price can actually turn out to be lower, which is an advantage to HR budgets and business leadership budgets. I think we've talked about the process. Cary's experience in terms of it's easier to manage if everyone knows the process. And so that's a benefit to everyone involved. You want to make sure that you have quality coaches. And if you've got vendors all over the place, how do you manage that? I really don't know. We work with you to understand your business, work with you on the strategy and the process, and that informs us the type of coaches we need to provide to you. So then we'll provide you a large team that know your business that you can choose from. And that team can be smaller or larger depending on your need. And we can ensure it has the quality, the background, the experience, and the diversity that your organization wants. When we have a clear strategy and process in place, with risk mitigation as being part of that, we reduce risk across the board, including things like confidentiality guidelines and alignment to ICF ethics. And then we want to measure success, and having a project manager work with HR and the people getting coached and the sponsors to survey, gather data, and there are ways throughout each coaching engagement that we can measure success as well. Not only allows you to understand that each coaching engagement works really well or how it's working, it also allows you that aggregate data to make company decisions on future budgets, future expansion of coaching, what's working, and adjust accordingly.
Thank you.
Anything else, Cary?
I'll just emphasize the measuring success piece. And for anyone who attended the last webinar, we talked a bit about measuring success, and having a managed service makes that so much easier. It's something that we were able to very easily implement in my experience, versus if everybody is doing their own thing and working with different vendors, there's no way to get a global sense of the impact that coaching is having on an organization and any of its goals.
Absolutely. And it's also measuring isn't just about the experience of the engagement. Did we achieve the goals of each engagement? It's also about how much coaching is being used, where it's being used in your organization. I mean, it's a lot of different types of data. Where are we in the engagement, so they know how engagements are progressing? Are the different milestones happening in the engagement as they should be happening? So it's also like a quality control in a good way. That we're measuring as well. I'd encourage the audience to, maybe we've missed something here. Maybe there's a risk in your mind of a managed service that we haven't touched on. So if there's anything that's going through your mind, please either shout out, come off mute, or pop it in the chat box and we'll address it.
Yeah, good point. And I gave everyone a warning a moment ago via chat that we were about to get to the part where we were going to ask them what are some of the questions that were coming up for them. So whether it's a comment on pros and cons, or whether it's a question on your mind, that is exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to start with you all's questions. So I think you'll have to hit unmute if you want to come off mute, or you can type your question into the chat if that's giving you trouble.
While people are thinking, I saw a participant ask about the slides. Sometimes we share a few of the slides on SlideShare, but predominantly we share the recording, so you'll all have access to this recording. We don't share the slide deck as a whole because it is some of our intellectual property. I don't know the reason why someone would want slides. If it's because you want to go back and speak to colleagues about what a managed service is, we offer that as a free service, no commitment. Like if you wanted to set up 45 minutes with you and your colleagues, we will come in and share a lot of what we've talked about today, so that you have chance to think as an organization more broadly if this is for you and to get your specific questions answered. So that's a free service. Again, no commitment. We just need to make sure that if this is right for you, it's right for you.
Awesome. All right, so we have some questions that we are often asked. But Swehoon, it looks like, if I pronounce that correctly, it looks like you beat me to the punch. So, question of, if you have a couple of existing vendors, would Churchill help us to manage that once we set up the standards? I think that's a pretty easy yes most of the time, but Jayne, I'll let you answer that.
We absolutely have done that. And it might look like we implement the process and you still use those coaches from those vendors as options, along with some extra Churchill coaches if you need more. And so maybe we'd play more of helping with the strategy and the process and the execution of the engagements to alleviate from that. But if you have coaches that you love that are not Churchill, absolutely. I'm just working on a proposal now where we're doing that with a Californian company. So yes, it's about what works for you. All right, it has to work for Churchill. It has to work for all the coaches involved, but predominantly it's what will work for your unique needs. So, Swehoon, we'd love to work with you on that. So feel free to follow up, and we can talk more.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And I know I will say from my experience, I will only speak from my experience. It wasn't necessarily, when I moved to a managed service at the organization I was speaking to, it wasn't necessarily the vendors, it was a couple of the coaches, right? And so a big concern with moving to a managed service was that nobody wanted to lose like 2 or 3 of those coaches. And there was absolutely a way of working with that, right? If you don't want to lose those coaches, we're not going to lose those coaches. So it's easy to accommodate some of those things.
We have that exact thing going on now. It's not for coaching managed service, it's diversity training, where certain parts of the country, this like diversity and a lot of the need of that that's going on right now, we do some of that. It's not in our 5 signature solutions, but Korea, Turkey, and some other countries around the world just love their Churchill coaches. And so we worked with a different vendor for them to train our coaches so the client could keep the coaches, but still use this vendor's expertise on diversity. So there's one example of how we've done this. We're very much a we, not an I. And the we is partnership, client, Churchill, and often includes other vendors. Yeah. And that makes me feel good, right? That we're really in this together.
So one of the questions that we often get is pricing across different regions. I don't know how many of you can relate to this with us today, but pricing really does differentiate or differ across regions. So Jayne, you want to say a little bit about
that? This has been a painful learning experience over probably the last 9 years. So I've learned a lot. And you can think of a region as the US because pricing varies a lot around the US even, right? And then you've got pricing by type of coaching, level of leader, and career coaching versus team coaching versus leadership coaching. So it's complex. And we've experienced so much of it. So we've got options here, and this is in the sort of a strategy and process phase of if what the red pins represent is where we have teams of coaches. So you can see we haven't done anything beyond North Africa as of yet, but definitely APAC, EMEA, North America, and we're growing in Latin America. And so India, for example, typically has a lower price expectation for coaching, but not too far away, China has a very high expectation, the price of coaching. So even within a region, it can vary tremendously. So we work with clients to figure out what is the best option. First of all, where will you need coaching most today and predicting in the future? And what is the best pricing strategy for you? So for some companies, it does make sense to have consistent pricing globally. For others, based on volume, it makes more sense to customize the pricing by region. So because we have this experience and can give you options, we then can work together to help you best manage your budget to suit your needs. I tried to say that in the simplest way possible. Cary, did that come across as clear? Do you want me to add more?
I think it does speak to the complexity. Again, across levels of the organization, price points differ. Across different regions, and just to emphasize, certainly within the US even. And so it's very helpful to have, again, a partner who understands all those factors, helping to manage costs and think about it within the context of what are your goals and what's your budget, right? And how can you maximize your budget given your goals?
That's it, right? It's in our interest that you make the most of your budget for coaching. You get the most results from your budget. And so this is why we work with you on this and can bring this diversity of pricing insight to you. Yeah.
We often also get asked, okay, so you guys say that you have this awesome bench of coaches, but how do I know that your coaches are a good fit for my organization? And right, because everybody thinks their organization is super unique. And actually, I agree with that. I find that every organization is really unique, and it's very helpful to understand the unique needs of that organization. So we are all unicorns. We are.
We are.
So how do we do this at Churchill?
So we actually partner with a couple of other vendors globally for this reason. Like, we don't provide a lot of first line. We do a lot of hypo coaching, which means leadership programs that are for high potential leaders that are identified in your organization. For example, programs where they go through a 2-year rotation, where they go through 6 months, they change roles and they have a coach through all of that. So the company do a lot of the program. We do some of the leadership training and coaching. We do a lot of that work where you've identified top talent, future leaders for your succession planning strategy. What we don't do is provide coaching for first line leaders or individual contributors en masse. So we partner, for example, with organizations that do that. So if our clients need that, we have an option. And so you're absolutely right. Different organizations offer different things. Do we have really great coaches? I'm biased, so I accept that, right? I think we have amazing coaches, and it's one of the reasons I don't coach much anymore, because I don't need to. They're amazing. So it's, again, this is the partnership. The client determines what's most important. Like, we have one client where if a coach is not ICF certified, absolutely don't even consider them for our organization. Another organization, particularly we see this more in Asia, that if the coaches haven't got really solid, even GM level of business experience, their senior leaders don't want to know, right? So we can offer all of the above. But for your organization, it's a partnership to decide what you believe great coaches look like for you. Diversity, of course, is very important. That's not just diversity of gender, race, culture. It's also diversity of background, sometimes diversity of expertise. Leadership means lots of different things. So if you need a coach for a particular leader or a group that is all about communication, presentation skills, we'll choose different coaches for that, versus a coach that really needs to work with someone on their influencing experience and negotiation skills. So the quality of coach is part of the strategy to determine what's most important for you. Then we define which coaches will work in your organization. Does that help? We have quite a robust filtering and data system to help us analyze our coaching bench.
Yeah, and I think that you've said this a couple times, but I'll just highlight the partnership part. So we can certainly down select by getting to know you and your organization to a smaller number, but then ultimately we really want to partner with leaders inside the organization to say, even of this suite of coaches that we think could be a good fit for you, which are the ones that you're going to be really excited to interview, and we can further refine it from there.
And it's flexible, right? Everything's constantly changing. So, for example, we had a client recently that wanted more coaches that were certified in Hogan. And we were able to offer that up to them because their needs changed internally and they became to love the leadership assessment Hogan. And so it's constantly changing, and that's fine. That's the beauty of this. It's flexible.
Yes, absolutely. So another question, and by the way, anybody else online have questions, please raise your hand or throw them into chat. But let's talk a little bit about an example of how, right? So what would it look like? How would we help an organization manage a coaching expansion? This is a very common question. Let's say we're considering, right? We're considering expanding beyond just the senior executives to a larger pool of leaders. That's going to take us from, and these are random numbers, from about 30 to about 300.
Yeah.
How would you help us to manage that?
So the how is defined by the why. Right, so I'll go back to that very original slide of SPE, strategy, process, and execution. It starts with the strategy. So somewhere along in your organization, someone or some people have decided it's a good idea to expand. So we have to, this is sort of, when I'm involved in this work, and I sometimes am, but often it's the coaches, this is where we're acting as coaches outside of a coaching engagement. We're working with you to ask you the questions that you haven't thought of, to get you to think more broadly, deeper, and more future state of what is it you want to do with these 300 coaches? What impact on your business, on your culture, on your value and leadership impact, on your people, on your stakeholders, on your customers? So we get you to think strategically of why this is important, to figure out where coaching needs to happen. Is it at different levels? Is it different divisions within your organization, different regions? Is it different types of coaching that is going to impact those business outcomes? Maybe it's not all one-on-one coaching. What we really need is cross-functional team coaching so that functional teams in Germany can work well with development teams in India and business teams in China, right? And so coaching is needed, but it's not necessarily one-on-one coaching. So the why and then the process becomes sort of the how we implement it, and then the E is the execution of making it happen at the cadence that you need and with the visibility and clarity to your audience that you need. So does that help a little? I'm conscious that, we've only got 10 minutes left. Does that give our audience something, Cary?
I think so. I'll let them tell us if it doesn't. They can ask follow-up questions. How about that?
Yeah, happy to answer any.
I do want to get to this last of our FAQs, which was how do you measure the impact of coaching at scale? We mentioned that as one of the key benefits of leveraging a managed service approach. And I can say a little bit about it, but Jayne, I'll give this to you first, and then you can talk back.
Yeah. I love this. And I'm proud to say that we take measuring success across all of our programs really seriously. And I think it's because I have a very business background. I come from 20 plus years as a business leader in pharmaceuticals, and I run the Churchill business. So I want to know that any penny that is spent, any minute of my time or our team's or coach's time is well worth it. And I have maximizer as number one. So that just tips me over the edge. So there are you have to think about what needs to be measured and why. Ultimately, we're investing in coaching for a better experience and business impact. That means performance and growth of our people so that we can deliver better. So ultimately, we've got to think about what are those end goals that we need to make sure that we're measuring. So that's part of it. Then we also have to measure the experience. Is the coaching and the coachee relationship working as well as we expected? So we want to make sure that's happening. Is the coachee achieving the goals that they wanted to in the engagement? So that's where it's very much strategic partners are involved within your organization who can observe that coachee in action. So it's measuring goal achievement from coaching. Does those coaching en masse then ultimately impact the business strategy and goals that you want and grow your people? But also we want to measure the execution of it all. One of the first questions HR asks us is, how are these engagements going? How are they progressing? It's very much in that execution space. So we really try and keep clients grounded in, is it strategically working for you? Are the processes working for you? And is the execution working well? So we measure all three of those. And it's important because they're all connected. If the engagements aren't happening well, then they won't achieve the goals. If the coaching itself isn't working well, you won't achieve your business impact. And if it's not working en masse, you won't achieve your strategy, right? They're all connected. So that's my response. Please add, Cary.
Sure, I'll add a couple things. So Jayne's business background and number one is maximizer. I'm a PhD organizational psychologist, and my number one strength is achiever. So I come at this not from like the every penny must count, but that if I'm going to do something in the terms of leadership development, I better be able to show that it worked, right? That it actually helped that leader grow and develop. And so but I also think about it from impact on the organization. So my experience has been like pulling, and they always exist, indicators within the organization of the impact you want leaders to have. So as one example, many organizations have indicators of employee engagement. And we know that leaders are a primary driver of employee engagement. So one would think that leaders who are leveraging coaching would be more capable and more effective at engaging their people than leaders who aren't leveraging coaching. And I've been able to show that that's the case in organizations that I've done this in. And then another example that actually was an interesting contrast to that was collaboration. So a lot of organizations get very stovepiped and units are not collaborating across key business units, right? And that's at a very high level, a very executive level. The tone gets set from the top. If the senior executives are not collaborating, then the project managers are not collaborating. And that's where it all breaks apart. And you can start to see that we're all just doing our own thing and it's not coming together. And I had a situation where, that's a key organizational metric is collaboration. And was coaching seeming to impact that? No, actually wasn't. What was very interesting is that when we fed that back to the coaches, they recognized that actually they didn't know that was such an emphasis. And they were able to then bring different questions into the conversation. And just the coach's awareness that collaboration was a very important driver for this time period actually started to influence the impact that coaching could have on that. So if the coach doesn't know that collaboration is something they should be on the lookout for, then they weren't really empowered to influence that as much.
I love that. I love that example. Thanks for sharing that, because it's the true partnership, right? I wish anything in this world that we put a plan in place and it works beautifully. It's always because everything else is changing around us and things affect everything. That by measuring success as we go, we can be agile and recognize when a shift is needed. And that's the beauty of this, right? That's the power of leadership, is the ability to see what's going on and shift. And that's a great example of where an organization worked with the coaches to adjust for what the organization needed.
Yeah. So we wanted to leave you, we're not quite done, but we wanted to leave you with some recommended next steps. So, everybody was here to explore managed service. What does that mean? And whether this was something that might be of interest to you. So the thing that we would recommend that you do sort of right off the bat is, and these are things that you can do on your own, right? You could have a partner to do it with you, but these are next steps for you. So strategy, start to really think about the next 1 to 3 years out, right? What impact do you want coaching to have, or do you need it to have on your organization? What are some of the really priority topics that you would hope or want that your executives or your leaders are bringing to their coaching and getting help on? Get really clear on these things. And then if you're going to have that impact, what's the volume that you expect? Also, just do a quick audit of your current process. Maybe you have one in place, maybe it's really ad hoc. But ad hoc is a process too. It's just not a very, it's not a very strict one. So think about this from a process lens. Do a quick process audit. I'm not going to read all the questions to you. And then do a bit of an execution audit as well. As long as you're currently working with coaches, you can really think about how things are currently getting executed and what are some shifts that you would want to bring into the equation if you were working from more of a managed service perspective. So again, you guys will get this recording. You can always go back to those and look at those questions more specifically if you want to dive into them. I just wanted to highlight some of the things that make Churchill such a great company to work with, also to work for, but really to work with. We bring a lot of real world experience. We're very focused on outcomes and making sure you're getting the outcomes you need from your work with us. It's not just all fuzzy feel good. We use this strengths approach, and the research is super clear that organizations are great and people are great because they build on their strengths, not because they try to fix every little thing that they could do better. We have a global footprint if that is important to you, and we're super agile and we work as a partnership. We are not going to come in and like dump something on you or force you into some sort of strict pattern that does not work for you. There is a sort of a sheet brochure like this available on the Churchill website. So if you're attending and you'd like to take something like this back to anybody else in your organization, you can certainly download it. And we can also send that to you if you let us know that you want it. And while this whole webinar obviously was focused on that managed service, like coaching at scale approach, we also provide the one-on-one sort of one-off coaching. So if you're interested in working with a Churchill coach or knowing who are some of the people we have on our bench, then certainly reach out to us. Just for attending today, we will send you this set of resources. If you were on any of the previous webinars, you've already gotten a couple of these, but the one on the far right, the HR Toolkit, is brand new, hot off the press. So this is something you have not seen yet. It is our HR Toolkit on executive coaching, and you will all get that in a follow-up to this webinar. This is our thank you gift for attending today. And just very quickly, here's our contact information. We are going to launch a new series in the fall. So September this is all focused on building a coaching culture. September is why your leaders need to be great coaches. So that's the Leader as Coach concept we mentioned before. And then you guys can read this. So this is our upcoming set. I do want to get to the value of this to get a quick sense of how well we served you today. So I'm going to launch this last poll and ask everybody who is with us to please let us know how much value you got from us today.
Thank you, Cary.
Absolutely. Thank you all. As you do this, I'll say thank you all for participating. We really appreciate it. And just let us know if there's any lingering questions, or if you would like to do a follow-up call with either Jayne or myself.
Connie will reach out to everyone. I'll do a personal reach out at some point. Connie will provide the tools and the recording. And if you want time with us in your organization to talk about this more, Cary or I am more than happy to do that. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Cary. And thank you, Connie, for helping us pull those great tools together for our audience.
Thanks,
Very
everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.